Hey guys, welcome to Video Game Corner. It's me, Jason, and today I'm going to give you the first episode of Tales of Gaming. And I'm going to talk about just gaming stories that I went through in my life. I don't know if it's really a story, but it was a time in my life when I got my very first Nintendo back in the 80s. I'd say it was probably 86, maybe 87. And the thing was I was about, I was born in 76, so, I was about 11 years old, so it was about, 87, maybe 88, I was 11 or 12. And, here's the thing, my parents, we lived in Rialto, California at the time. My, little sister is 10 and a half years younger than me. And, of course, she was like 1.5 to 2 at the time. She was a little baby. And we had a 2-story house in Rialto. Well, my dad's sister, my aunt, and her 3 kids, my cousins, had to move in with us. And we had the 2 bedrooms upstairs, and then we had a bedroom downstairs. It was like a den. And that was my room, and I loved having a room separate from everybody else's. But when they moved in, I had to go live up and share a room with my little baby sister, and it sucked. But, my dad and my mom were trying to help my aunt and my cousins out because they didn't have anywhere to go at the time. They were having money problems and stuff. Well, ended up getting a Nintendo, and I believe it was for Christmas one of those years. And because they lived with us for about 1.5 years, I think. It was a long time. It was longer than I would have liked as a kid. But anyway, because I remember when they moved out, man, I started packing up, and I moved right back into my old room, and I was happier than a pig dipped in shit, I'll tell you what. And because I dug a little pond outside of the window, and I got pond plastic and put some, I used to catch bluegill up with my dad up at Green Valley Lake in up by Big Bear, Southern California. And I would keep the bluegill and I'd throw them into this pond, so I had about 2 or 3 bluegill in there because it was just a little small pond I had outside of my window. It was pretty cool, and I had like a little fountain, with water. It was what I was into. I did a lot of gardening too. Vegetable gardening. It's funny because I'm allergic to vegetables because I have oral allergy syndrome, but I always like growing stuff. It was always fun. But anyway, back on topic. So we got a Nintendo. Well, didn't really have a TV for it at first. But my aunt, she had this little 12-inch television set. And we put it in one of the living rooms. We had a living room and a family room, I guess. It was like two rooms. We put it in the front one over by the back door, and it was on a little TV stand on wheels. Put the Nintendo and the little TV there. My cousins and I would sit there and play Nintendo. And I don't know how many games we played. I remember we had Mario Brothers at first, and we had, of course, and we thought it was cool. Remember when I first got it, my parents let me hook it up on the 25-inch TV, and back then 25 inches was pretty big television, unless you got, like a big screen, which is a whole different class of TV back then, those old projection screens. But it was a pretty big TV when I was, a little kid, and I couldn't believe how big it was. It's funny because now I play on a 50-inch LCD, and I still play Nintendo on that, and it's like, it seems too small to me now. Maybe I'm just... I just enjoy that big television way too much. But is that even possible to enjoy it too much? I don't think so. So, anyway, I remember one day I took the Nintendo, I took like the controllers out, I disconnected them, I wrapped everything up, and I set it all there really nice and neat. I was so proud of it. And my aunt got it in her head that I was telling everybody that they couldn't play my Nintendo. So she takes the TV away. And I'm like, what the hell? All I was doing was just cleaning it up. Anyway, I don't know. My family, I don't talk to them anymore. I don't really... my dad's got a brother, which I hardly know. He lives in Ohio. And he's got 2 sisters, and I have all these cousins, and I haven't really talked to any of them in about 8 or 9 years, 10 years. except to one or two I talked to about 4 or 5 years ago. I just don't feel like part of their family anymore, and I don't really care. It doesn't bother me. But anyway, but yeah, that was just one interesting gaming story. Yeah, my cousins and I, we were close in age. I had one cousin that was a year older than me, and one cousin, his younger sister, she was a year younger than me. And we hung out a lot as kids, and we would play video games a lot. And I remember my cousin, he was kind of a cocky guy. And I'm sure he's still cocky. I haven't talked to him in about 4 years, but it was really funny because he takes me down to Circle K. He lived in Colton at the time. This was before the Nintendo. This is probably a couple years before they moved in with us. They lived in Colton, California, and I used to go over there, and he'd say, "Hey, let's go down." We go down to Circle K and get candy and sodas or whatever, because it was only a couple blocks away. And he's like, "You gotta see this new game. It's called Super Mario Brothers." I'm like, "Super Mario Brothers? What's that?" You know, I didn't know what the hell it was. I still had my Atari 2600. I was playing, you know, Frogger and Space Invaders and Asteroids, and I was happy to have that. I thought that thing was cool. And he's like, "You gotta try this." He says, "You gotta see this." So we go over there, and he shows me the Super Mario Bros. And I'm looking at the colors and everything and the screens, and I'm like, "This thing is cool." And I'm thinking, "Man, this is the best. This is like the coolest thing I've ever seen." Can't get. And back then, you know, everybody kept saying every time a new game system come out, "Can't get any better than this." Even though now, like I say, it's so much better now. And it's as far as, you know, the technological stuff, maybe not so much the games. That's always an issue of debate. But anyway, so he puts a quarter in, he starts playing, and because he was so cocky, and he beat the first level, and he did the jump and got the 5,000 points on the arcade, and he's like, "Yeah, see," and he's like all cocky about it, and I'm just sitting there like, "Oh, this thing is so cool." I thought it was the coolest thing. And I remember, man, when we got Mario Brothers on the Nintendo a couple years later, man, that was cool. And yeah, because the Nintendo was out, I believe, but you know, they were always talking about Rob the Robot and Gyromite. I didn't even know what Super Mario Brothers yet, but when I got the Super Mario Brothers, I guess it was the action set, and it had Mario, you know, Super Mario Brothers 1 packed in. And God, we played that game so much, and Duck Hunt and everything else. We would sit there with the zapper, and when the game would start getting a lot faster, we'd be right up on the TV screen with the zapper right up against the glass. It's pretty fun. It was just a really cool time in my life, and I remember later when my cousins moved out and my parents bought me Punch-Out. It wasn't the Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, it was a regular Punch-Out. And I remember getting it one night. And that night I'm sitting there playing it for hours trying to get the patterns of all the fighters. I remember my dad came in and he says, "So, how do you like the new game?" And oh man, I'm just loving it. So he came to check on me, and I remember having trouble with some of the fighters. I remember leaving my Nintendo on and going to bed and getting up the next morning, man, and I was just beating them. Same thing happened with Wizards and Warriors. I was sitting there, I rented it at the time. I used to rent it a lot because, you know, back then you only got one game, as a lot of you know. You get games like maybe on your birthday or Christmas. And I remember I was playing Wizards and Warriors, and I couldn't figure out, there's this part where you're in the front of the castle, the outside of the castle. And you got to climb up all this platforming, and then you got to jump over onto these other tops of it's like a main castle, and then you have the two little side towers, and you got to jump. And it was like 1 a.m, and my eyes were going out, and I was tired. I was a young kid, and I just couldn't see anything. And pretty much that's what happened. And the next morning I got up and I played through the game again and got to that part, and then I realized, oh, you can jump on that, and I ended up, I think, beating the game a day or so later that day or a day after or something like that. It was pretty fun. It is a pretty cool time in my life. That's all the video game stories today. I'm going to save some for, the next episode. I will say this, though. this isn't a video game story, but it's a pretty funny bar story. I was about 21 years. I was 21, 22. I think I was 21. And I was kind of doing this work for my dad was a machine rebuilder. He used to rebuild what are called cold headers. And there are these machines that make rivets. They put the heads on rivets and like screws and bolts. But we did the ones that redid the rivets mostly. And by his shop, there was a bar that I'd go and hang out. And they'd have like dollar beers. And, just little dollar beers. And one day I went over there to play pool with this guy that would hang out with us that worked for my dad sometimes, guy Eric. And he and I would go and play pool while we drink a few beers. And I remember just as a, being cocky kid that I was at 21, it was time to, you put all the balls in and then it's time to sink the 8-ball and you call the shot. And I remember taking the pool cue and putting it behind my back and then calling it and hitting it. And I didn't think I'd make it. I was just being a smart ass. The thing, because it bounced back, because the shot was I had to bounce it back and then go back in. So it had to bounce off and then bounce back and go into the corner pocket. And it made it. And all these drunk barflies were like, yeah! And it was just a pretty funny experience. But it's a game, but it's not a video game. But I just figured I'd throw that in because I was thinking about it today and how silly it was. But anyway, guys, I want to hear about your experiences. Give me some tales of gaming from your point of view, from what you've done. I always love to hear, gaming stories because a lot of them are pretty funny, a little silly, and it's fun to hear about. So anyway, guys, it's Video Game Corner, and I'm Jason, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.